Hi everybody!
Aloha, welcome! We're up in Library and Archives again with DeSoto Brown, and I'm Hadley Anderson, and we're going to be talking about Hawaii and fashion today for Throwback Thursday.
Hooray! Well, first of all, if you're not aware of it, there is a wonderful article in the newspaper today, in the Honolulu Star-Advertiser, which is about a new exhibit at Bishop Museum, which is called WOW, which means the World of Wearable Art. And this is an exhibit that has traveled to Bishop Museum from New Zealand. And I really recommend that you come and look at it because it is fantastic, is it not?
It is amazing. Some of the things that they've come up with and the designers are just completely out of this world.
Yeah.
And they have a great performance that they actually do once they come up with those different designs and things like that. It's on par with like Cirque du Soleil, I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the requirements is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the requirements is, I mean, this is a competition for people to create costumes or clothing, and a lot of these are more costume-like than just what you could actually wear in your daily life, but I suspect one of the requirements is somebody's got to actually be able to wear it.
Oh, absolutely,
yeah. Right.
You don't have to sit down in it, but
you have to be able to physically walk around in it. So anyway, this is in today's Honolulu Star-Advertiser, today being Thursday, October 8th. So if you want to go check this out, this article, which has a lot more photographs as well as information on the WOW exhibit at Bishop Museum, I'm sure you can find that online at the Honolulu Star-Advertiser site. And again, October 8th, in case you're seeing this not today, but at some point in the future. Well, so since we just talked about the WOW exhibit, what we're going to talk about now is fashion in Hawaii.
Ooh.
And you're aware that there is a garment and fashion industry here.
Absolutely. A few years back, we had our Shaheen exhibit,
Absolutely.
which was the start of a lot of the aloha shirts, or
Exactly.
just thematic Hawaiian aloha shirts.
Correct. Well, as I just said, Hawaii has had a garment industry for a long time, and initially, say at the start of the 20th century, the clothing that was being made here was just mostly work clothing, nothing particularly interesting from a fashion standpoint. But by the 1930s, there began to be a local style of fashion, which became known as aloha wear. And initially, that was because people were making shirts out of Japanese fabric, because of course there are lots of Japanese people, ethnically Japanese people here. There was a lot of Japanese fabric for sale. Lots of women in those days, 1920s and 30s, made garments at home. So you could buy this really colorful Japanese fabric, which was intended for children's kimonos in Japan. But it turned into something that young adults or teenage boys and girls began to wear as a fashion. And gradually, by about the late 1930s, fabric began to be manufactured that didn't have Japanese designs, but had Hawaiian or tropical designs. And that was the beginning of a whole industry. Well, by the early 1950s, ta-da!
Wow.
Here's a photograph of a luau at Don the Beachcombers restaurant in Waikiki in June of 1951. And I think you can clearly see that everybody in this photograph is wearing Hawaiian fashion, aloha fashions. And not only did local people wear these garments, but they were also sold very much for tourists. And the funny thing was, people would come here on vacation and they'd buy these things and they'd wear them on vacation, and then they went back to the mainland, and suddenly you didn't have a lot of places to wear these really colorful garments, particularly for men, because it was a big switch in men's clothing to wear clothes like this in those days, because men mostly wore, dark clothes and didn't wear bright colors and things like that. But when you were on vacation here, you kind of could go crazy and buy clothing like this. Well, famous Duke Kahanamoku, and this is a photograph of Duke Kahanamoku, he is wearing a shirt that was manufactured by a mainland company called Cisco Casuals, but it was the Duke Kahanamoku brand clothing. So he actually licensed his name for the production of aloha wear, and it started in 1949, continued through much of the 50s, and he made royalties on the sales of these garments. And he actually did get to choose the fabric designs. It wasn't just that, okay, you put my name on it. He really did have the right to either okay or reject the designs for the clothing that was made with his name on it. And later in the 1960s, starting in 1961, there was a separate new line of Duke Kahanamoku clothing, which again, he received royalties for that. So Duke, as a famous Hawaiian, or the most famous Hawaiian, loaned his name to the production of clothing. So, Hadley just mentioned, now I've got some wonderful 1950s pictures to show you, large format ones.
Oh, those are my favorite, yeah.
This is a really cool picture. This is Alfred Shaheen himself in the Alfred Shaheen factory here in Honolulu in probably about 1957 or thereabouts. And the Shaheen company was interesting because not only did they make the garments, in other words, they had the seamstresses who actually sewed them, they designed the women's clothes, because the women's clothing was more than just basic shirts like for men. And they also actually printed the fabric, which is unusual because usually people, the local manufacturers, have the fabric made elsewhere and it just gets sent here and they sew the garments here. So Shaheen, as you can see in this picture, is in the factory with two models, and in the background is the equipment that made and handled the fabric after they had printed it. And if I remember right, I'm looking over the top here, yeah, the fabric up here that you see at the top of the picture was called Bumblebees, and I had a shirt of that fabric. Actually, my dad bought it new in the 50s, and later on in the 70s and 80s, I wore that shirt after he had stopped wearing it. Unfortunately, I wore it till it fell apart. But anyway, and here's another picture of a Shaheen garment. This is really typical of the time period. Mrs. Shaheen, the wife, actually the mother of the guy who ended up running the company, had started out as a seamstress before World War II. So she knew how to make women's clothes. She knew how to design and make women's clothes. So the Shaheen women's clothes in the 50s were really well designed as 50s style garments. And this is their favorite model, whose name was Beverly Noah. There also was, here's another example of a locally made type of garment. This, of course, is a mu'umu. And this became popular even on the mainland, too, for a time in the 50s and 60s, because it was a very comfortable type of garment. And in the 50s in particular, they made these really large-sized ones with lots of fabric. So for the fabric design, you could really do some interesting things because you had a lot of fabric to work with. And the photograph was taken at what was then called the Kaiser Hawaiian Village Hotel in Waikiki, which was opened in 1955, and for the first 5 or 6 years got used for a lot of publicity because it was a very modern, interesting background, and also the hotel liked to promote itself. And there again, that's the type of mu'umu from the 50s.
Now Shaheen became very particular with the Bishop Museum because he actually came to the Bishop Museum to look for themes and images.
And that's one of thank you for bringing that up, because that's one of the really interesting things that happened at that time, that fabric designers starting in the 1930s actually came to Bishop Museum to do research to look for patterns that they could use for designing fabric. And the first guy that did that was a man whose professional name was Keone of Hawaii. And he came here in 1938, thereabouts. He looked at kappa designs, and he designed that was the first time somebody had come here to do that type of research. And after the fabric was manufactured, there was a small display in Hawaiian Hall of the original kappa and the fabric that had just been made. And then, of course, people continued to do that. So it was really, they worked to look for traditional Hawaiian motifs, tropical motifs that would set them apart from clothing that was made elsewhere in the United States. But they also wanted to, as you can see here, they didn't want to just get caught in doing just Hawaiian or tropical things, because they knew that that was, for a lot of the United States, if you wanted to sell to people elsewhere, you couldn't just sell lightweight clothing that people could wear in the summer. So they tried to branch out into more mainstream fashion as well. We still have a garment industry today. It's not quite the same as it was at the time, because in the 1950s, when these photographs, by the way, were all taken for like a fabric or a garment manufacturing association convention that happened here in Honolulu in 1959. And these pictures were taken for the brochure or the booklet that was published for that particular event. The garment industry today, again, as I said, is still with us, but it's not quite at the same level of importance or significance that it used to have back at the time of the photographs that I just showed you. So, that's our Throwback Thursday for today. And this is Bishop Museum. We're in Bishop Museum Archives. And for more information about what's happening at Bishop Museum, please visit our website, www.bishopmuseum.org. And again, don't forget, we've got this amazing and wonderful traveling exhibit called WOW, of fantastic costumes and garments from an international competition from New Zealand. And one thing also, too, is we're hoping that this WOW exhibit gets people locally excited enough to where they want to enter that competition. And we have some local designers sending some of their work down there to be judged as well. So, till next week, everybody, I'm DeSoto Brown.
I'm Hadley Anderson. And we'll
see you next week.
Throwback Thursday next week.